Good afternoon. Today is October 5th, 2020, and this is the regular meeting of the Glendale Water and Power Commission. My name is Sarojini Lal, and I am a commissioner filling in today for the commission president who cannot be here. Mr. Clerk, first item.
Sure. We'll proceed with roll call. Before I proceed with the roll call, President Kadikian will not be present at tonight's GWP Commission meeting. With that, we have Commissioner Savanesian.
Here.
Commissioners Flanagan.
Present.
Commissioner Jasmine Darian.
Here.
And Commissioners Pro Tem Law.
Present. Okay, Mr. Clerk, this next item.
Next item we have before you is GWP Commission staff comments.
Commissioners, do you have any comments? Are there any staff comments at this point? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item.
Sure, next item before you is under 3A, reports, summer heat impacts.
President Pro Tem Law, members of the Commission, Mr. Dan Scorza will present this report on behalf of GWP.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Daniel Scorza. I'm the Chief Assistant General Manager for the electric side for Glendale Water and Power. So we have a presentation for you today on the heat wave conditions during the Labor Day period and one right before. So on the first slide, what we have is we had several consistent days of record breaking temperatures, and our equipment wasn't designed for continuous high temperatures, especially with not having cooling period at night. So as you can remember, the temperatures were high, including at night. Majority of the outages were in Glendale were overhead and underground transformers from overheating, and that was very common in these conditions. Many other utilities faced similar situations, and with their outages lasting much longer. Calais also experienced stage 3 emergencies, and they had some of the rotating blackouts as we see. Why don't we go to the next slide? So if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so here's the numbers that we have. There were actually 2 heat waves. The first one occurred on 9/18. I think there's a typo there. Oh yeah, no, I'm sorry, 8/18. The dates we have on there. We reached 108 that day, and then we had a second heat wave on 9/6/2020. And on the first outage, we only had 8 transformers fail. There were no feeder outages. And you have to remember, this is 8 transformers out of 9,265 transformers within the GWP system. On the second heat wave, temperatures were much higher. We reached a peak of 115 degrees. And again, we had no rotating outages, and we only had 1 forced outage. We had 3 feeder outages, and they occurred both on the 4 kV and 12 kV circuits. And that's important to note because there was a question whether the 12 kV system is more secure. In this case, it didn't make a difference. And then one portion of one of our feeders was dropped for an hour or less, and it affected 60 customers. We had 10 transformers failures, and again, total customers affected were 2,992, basically 3,000 customers. Again, 10 transformer failures out of 9,265. And these are small percentages. If you were to do it in a percent basis, it's 0.001%. So very little. We'll go on to the next slide. Okay, just to make a note here, the conversions from 12 kV will not prevent transformer failures due to the heat wave events. Outages occurred both on the 4 and 12 kV side. Prolonged operation and higher than design temperature causes transformer failures. And then just as a note, to prevent premature failure of transformers due to high temperature, you either have to lower the transformer load by adding solar, battery, energy efficiency, and demand side management systems, such as we're doing now with our clean energy proposals, and we've been doing some of this as we go on, as we were running our system, or by deploying additional transformers on the feeders. Now, once a feeder reaches a limit of how much it can provide, you would have to add another feeder or expand the substation. So you really have to add new substations as well. By the way, if you look at the number percentage-wise, we're about 77% on 12 kV. So we do have a large percentage, and I think that's higher than our neighboring utilities, Burbank and Pasadena. So if you compare them to us, we're at a much higher percentage in terms of 12 kV feeders and circuits. And by the way, the picture that you see, that was one of the transformers that failed on the 9/6, so September 6th. So that's an actual photo of a failure of one of our transformers that eventually caught on fire because of the failure. We'll go on to the next slide real quick here. External resources, remote generation, Magnolia Power Plant tripped, did not return until Sunday at 1300 hours. So we had a loss of generation from Burbank. Transmission was derated. That's our tie with LADWP. And Cal ISO restricted on Saturday and then on Sunday as well, and then Monday as well on those times. So there were multiple things going on, both on the distribution and generation side. And again, you have to remember how our system runs. We have three parts of a utility. We have generation, transmission, and distribution. So here we're talking all three components were affected during this heat wave. And let's go on to slide 6. Local generation, units available for 9 were the only units available for the whole weekend. 8A would not start and was declared unavailable. Plant capacity was at 75 megawatts. We had 0 reserves and minimal units operating. Standard operating procedures is always, to maintain reserves, to enter into rolling blackouts to ensure proper reserves are always maintained. During this situation, we had run out of local reserves. It was so intense, the heat that we were experiencing. System was operating at max capacity. Another unit trip or an additional load would have resulted in rolling blackouts due to the supply. Let's go on to the next slide, 7. Crews worked nonstop through the weekend. We had less heat-related impacts than many other utilities in the area and in the state, which was a result of our excellent maintenance and upkeeping of the system. In fact, we got requests from LADWP and Pasadena to assist them. Now, unfortunately, we were busy with our system. We weren't able to assist them, but they had reached out to us for assistance. So everybody was in dire needs of help. In comparison to other utilities, we are lower staffed, and we'll see that on the table on the next page. Call for conservation each day using phone calls, text, social media, and websites. We thanked our customers for conserving and helped us in our situations and warned if we don't conserve, we would commence rolling blackouts. We simply stated in our outreach that the plant in its current condition exaggerates the problem that we were facing during these type of events. Why don't we go to slide number 8? Okay, so our distribution circuits are about 50% if we count by how many feeders are at 12 kV, but 77% by length, which represents more correctly the load that we have. So we're pretty good in terms of the, where we are. We're much higher than Pasadena or Glendale. Pasadena or Burbank. The conversion will not, this type of conversion would not prevent the kinds of transformer-related incidences that we had. And also, we have a wildfire mitigation upgrade program that adds, modernization efforts, includes installation of covered overhead wire, and then upgrades of our transformer and connection of our termination, which would help us in the reliability of our system. In the table that you see on the side, it also shows how we are staffed compared to the other utilities. Also here, you must remember Burbank and Pasadena are smaller utilities than we are, but yet they have more staff. But yet with the staff we have, we've completed a lot higher numbers in terms of our conversion, and we're able to maintain our system reliability just as high or higher than our neighboring utilities. The only thing is that as we go through our conversion, it's a slow process. We need to bring in outside resources to be able to complete the conversion as quickly as possible. Otherwise, with the current staff we have, we're only able to do at maximum 2 conversions per year, and this would take many years to finish our conversion process. Therefore, we're working with the union with our unions to look at the ability to contract out some of these conversion work. But you also must remember some of the conversion work also needs the engineering backing. The design of these systems would also have to be augmented so that we can keep up with the conversion in the field. So it's both resources in the field to do the construction, but also in the engineering side and in-house side to help us prepare for the conversion. Let's go on to slide number 9, and we should be finishing up here. Continue to prepare in the face of extreme heat waves and other weather-related conditions that maintain our reliability and restore power for our customers to safely and efficiently operate our system. We're switching out older transformers, part of our routine infrastructure maintenance and modernization efforts, and we saw those in the number of failures that we experienced. Very little failures, 8 in the first heat wave and 10 in the second heat wave. And want to provide customers and our community with the highest levels of obtainable in regards to clean, renewable, sustainable, climate-friendly, and reliable and affordable alternatives. Thank you, and I would take any questions now for me or the rest of the management staff here at GWP.
Thank you for that presentation. Commissioners, do you have any questions? I can go through you alphabetically. Commissioner Avanesian, do you have any questions? Commissioner Flanagan, do you have any questions?
I do. Thank you very much, and thank you for a great presentation. I was curious how we got through these extraordinary heat waves, and so as we hear the story, congratulations to everybody on the GWP team for making that happen. And it sounds like it was all hands on deck, and also I guess congratulations to the customers that conserved, that chipped in, that responded to the calls. It sounds again like we just skated by thanks for an incredible team effort. I just had a couple of very specific questions. The first heat wave, the temperature was 108 degrees, and then we peaked out at 335 megawatts. The second one, if I'm reading it right, was 115 degrees, a lot hotter, and we peaked out at 314. Is there some reason for that? Was it a different day of the week that
Yes.
caused that?
One was on a weekend. So right, it was closer to the weekend, and it was a holiday.
Okay. So the businesses were largely shut down, and therefore we were able to.
Mark may have another comment. Mark, do you have a comment?
Again, it's Mark Young. The actual 2016 peak that we had was on a Sunday, and that's unprecedented to have 316 on a Sunday. If this were on a pre-COVID or work day, it would have been drastically higher.
Thank you. Yeah, it makes sense. We normally would peak on a Thursday, so I understand all the buildings are hot and all the workers are hot and bothered, and by the end of the week, there's tons of heat in the building. And is that right? Thursday, Friday is our typical peak.
We've actually been very lucky, and most of our peaks over the last couple of years have actually fallen on the weekend. But this peak here, it was 114 degrees, and the minimum temperature was 81. So you could see that there was no relief in sight. Typically, if you can get into the low 70s or even into the 60s at night, things can calm down, everything can cool off, and you can prepare yourself for the next heat wave. For instance, last week, on Wednesday, our temperature was 106 degrees with a peak of 278 megawatts, but the temperature at the minimum went down to 70. So it allowed things to cool off, and it allowed everything to try to get back to normal, and then you would see that ramp up again up into the 103 on Thursday. But that didn't happen in the heat wave that we were talking about, or this one where they were saying the second heat wave. It was hot, and oh my God, hot.
Oh, yes, I'm sure it was. And just following up on this whole discussion of the distribution system and the 12 kV versus the 4 kV, pardon me, I am a newbie on the commission, and you said that the different feeders that are on those voltages, it didn't really matter in the heat wave. They both had the equal failures. But what is the fundamental benefit of the 12 kV? Is it just a more efficient delivery of less line losses?
Yes, I mean, Commissioners, this is Dan Scorza. Yes, you know, at the higher voltage, normally the current's lower, and our losses are calculated, the way they happen is because of the resistance internal to the transformers, and it's the square of the current. So I squared R, resistance times the current squared. So what happens that when you go to the higher voltage, you have less current, but so you're more efficient when you transmit. But you come to a limit as you have transformers out there. The current still approaches a certain limit in the transformers. As you reach that, that's when you would overload it. That's when you would add extra transformers, or you would add an extra substation so that you could relieve the amount of current flowing through there. So it's the upgrade of the systems. The other way you can do it is by doing demand side management on the customer side, right? Making the customer more efficient. If you give them solar, if you have methods of reducing the customer side load as well. So now in the extreme cases, how do we do that in case you can't instantaneously do that? The other way is to drop load, and that's when you have the rolling blackout, right? And temporarily you would relieve the loads on this equipment. So those are the methods that we have. But we were fortunate that we really didn't get there. And in one instance, we had to drop a portion of a feeder, which was feeding 60 customers. And we were able to do that less than an hour. And we were able to put the system back together again. Again, you're right, Commissioner Flanagan, that it was our customers also helped us. So it was a team effort, both on the GWP side with all hands on deck, field and engineering and operations working together, plus our customers adhering and helping us out by conserving.
Well put, and I know that we talked at our special meeting about demand response programs and working with our large commercial customers in sort of an organized way. But it sounds like everybody chipped in. It's great. And so my last question is it just seems like we had the perfect storm, and we lost Magnolia. Transmission was derated from LADWP. The ISO was restricted. We only had 2 units available at Grayson. None of our clean power projects that we talked about at the last meeting are obviously operational, and so it's just to me it's just incredible that we were able to keep running. And I guess you said we had 0 reserves. What is the most immediate thing we can do? It seems I guess I'll leave it at that. What is the most immediate thing that we can do to prepare for this so that we have greater reserves?
So, Dan, I'll take care of this. One of our units is 8BC. It's our largest unit. That's unavailable at the moment. We have that unit out to be inspected, to be repaired. That would give us about 65 megawatts, maybe 63 megawatts based on that heat condition. That'd give us an additional 63 megawatts that we might be able to utilize in the future. Keep in mind that the reserves were fully depleted, and that's not the standard normal operating practice. We're always supposed to carry the reserves so as not to create grid instability so that the grid would collapse. and we weren't able to do that at this particular time. We had both the units on at full, and we would not be able to have handled one more contingency or any other additional load had it happened.
Okay, well, thank you. It sounds like that one unit being unavailable at Grayson was what caused us to, in this instance, before we get into our clean power future, is what really caused us to be right up against the ropes.
It caused us not to have the contingency. We would have to maintain that contingency, that N1 or N-1 contingency that you're required to have. Even Los Angeles, when they have their contingencies, they'll maintain their contingencies at the expense of rolling blackouts. We didn't do that at this particular time, but we are really required to be stewards to the grid to have that reserve, and we didn't. So we really, that additional megawatts out of that unit should have been used for reserves.
Do we face penalties for not upholding our responsibility to the grid stability?
Because we're not directly touching the bulk electric system and we're not a BA, if LA experienced penalties based on not maintaining reserves, that would have been shared or passed on to us. So yes, we would have.
Okay, thank you.
This is Haran Avanesian. I have a question. May I ask a question?
Yes, please go ahead, Commissioner.
During heat wave, I don't think that it will affect these small transformers. Because during heat wave, the average of all the city or a big segment of the city is a kind of getting overload. But this small transformer, actually whatever load is on that, it remains the same. The only thing is some of the customers of that special small transformer that are limited houses are kind of simultaneously they're using their coolers or something like that. So my question is, do you have any policy to size this small transformer or connect this small transformer so that, for example, you have 20% reserve there, or whatever is anticipated that during this heat wave, it may cause problem. The other question that I have, we can't wait till something happens and gets on fire, because this fire may kind of expand and it may cause disaster, So especially some of these poles are wooden. So what is your policy to kind of how fast you can put off these fires?
Yes. Hi. So the commissioners, this is Dan Scorza. Commissioner Avdisian, yes. So on the first question, on the transformers, we're always looking at the system to ensure that there is this extra room. But you're completely right. What happened in this instance is that customers turned on things that we had not seen for a while. It depends, so we do size we do put the load on our transformers such that we don't overload the transformers. And if need be, we do add transformers. But we don't see these effects until these type of heat waves happen. And again, as time goes by, customers may be adding more load into their homes. They may be adding pools. They may be adding extra air conditioning, extra electronics. That may increase the load, and that we don't see it within that 1 year period. So the places where we do see it, we do go back and size accordingly, or add extra transformers, or move the circuits around so that we don't overload them on pole tops. But the system is dynamic. It does change. And so it's sort of catching up and predicting where they are. Again, in this case, the picture of the transformer that failed, yes, unfortunately, there was too much there, and it overloaded the transformers. And in some cases, because of these heat waves, what also happens is the aging of these transformers are accelerated. So transformer, even though they usually last 30 years, but if they go through multiple heat waves, and we don't see the peaks every time when it's damaged inside, but heat damages these the insulation inside. So something that would last 30 years may only last 15 years because it's gone through some of these heat waves. And we do watch the loading, and we do try to design around so that we do not cause them to be overloaded. And the numbers you gave, 20%, is something that we do work with. Sometimes we do try to move the loads around. And again, load studies are constantly done. One of the things that we'll be doing as part of this new energy, clean energy program, is that we would be looking at the loading on our feeders and also for our customers, so that as additional solar resources are put in, that we don't overload these transformers in both directions, either feeding the load or feeding back from the load from these new renewable assets that will be throughout the customer systems, so that we don't cause overload. So we do look at this, and some of it is catch up, and we don't see it until the year after, because we would have corrected for these problems, but they pop up in small places. And you can see from the small number of failures that we're doing a good job. The amount of failure of transformers were very good. And if you want, I can answer the second question as well.
Dan, if I may interrupt you just one quick second,
Yes.
Commissioner Avanesyan. We have our dispatchers that work 24 hours a day, and they're continuously monitoring the system. And if they see a potential overload of a feeder or a circuit on that feeder, they dispatch the field crews to go ahead and do field switching to field switch the capacity on that feeder to another feeder. And 80% is that magic number. But during this heat wave, we were near the 90% and over mark. But the dispatchers on a 24-hour basis are monitoring this.
Thank you. Actually, you have done amazingly good job. So always, there is a room for improvement. For example, here I have a suggestion that you put in your preventive maintenance, routine, add to check the load on each transformer once in a while, and then check the insulation if it's deteriorated. As you mentioned, yeah, that's right. If many times heat wave happens, then the insulation gets deteriorated. But once in a while, as a preventive maintenance, I think I'm suggesting to add these two items to your list.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Abish. And so we do some of that, but we should be more vigilant in terms of looking at this. We do look at the transformers, but we'll see if we can increase some of these maintenance and monitoring of these transformers. One of the things that's done that we don't have here is that they would monitor the temperatures of the transformers by having, on the old days, they used to put a thermal tape on it, so you would see the coloring on the tape to tell you if the transformer had been overheated. But the newer ones are putting, some utilities are putting remote sensing that would sense the tank temperature and tell you if the transformer had exceeded a certain number. So that's something we were talking about with our engineering folks of implementing here, so that we would have some type of remote looking at these transformers on the poles. The substation transformers are all monitored through our SCADA system, our substation SCADA system that looks at everything, and we're looking at the temperatures. And, these transformers, as they approach around 200, 220 degrees Fahrenheit, we know we're coming to the limits of it. And that's when we start looking at, moving things off transformers, at least on the substation part. And then when we do model our transformers, we look at our feeders. We have an idea of what the loading is, and so we do move loading like Mark Young described. So we do have that in there, but we'll be more diligent. And if you wanted me to answer the second part of the question about the fires, I believe you had a question on that. So let me tell you about the wildfire mitigation. So we're looking at covered conductors in some of the tier 2 and tier 3 zones to ensure that the risk of wildfires are reduced. In some of the places, we're looking at composite poles that are made of not wood, but metal or composite materials that would be more fire retardant or fireproof. Cross arms could be made out of fiberglass, which are more resistant to UV light, so they wouldn't break. And also at the transition points between conductors on a pole, there is protection that you add to the insulators so that animals, birds, squirrels cannot short the cables to ground. So all this effort are being put into the different areas within our distribution system. We're also looking at more modern systems that would also detect the breaking of a conductor mid-span, and that would de-energize the line before it touches the ground, so that even if it touches the ground, it wouldn't spark. So we're looking at that technology as well. And especially for our, we do have a 34 5 kV line, which is good also for 66 kV. That line will be looking at putting that protection into it. So it would detect the line being broken, de-energize it before the line could touch the ground to start a fire. So there's efforts that we're putting in. So we're constantly looking at that. We do have a mitigation plan that's online, available for the public to review, and we'll be refining that plan as we go forward. So we're at implementing our plan moving forward. So that's my answer to the second question you had.
Thank you very much for a very detailed and precise explanation.
Commissioner Avanesian, if you've completed your questions, I'll move on to Commissioner Jasmadarian.
Thank you. I just wanted to say congratulations to the management and employees for a job well done. I did have one question, but I think you pretty much answered it, and that was, would you be mapping the load, see how to effectively use demand management and clean energy programs for the fleet? And it sounds like you're heading in that direction. So thank you.
If I could ask a question, on the first page of the presentation, you talked about a stage 3 emergency. CAISO experienced a stage 3 emergency. How many stages of emergency are there?
Yeah, that's a Mark Young question, I think.
Mark, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am. There's 3 stages of emergency, and it has to do with the degree of maintaining reserves. And stage 3 is the worst.
Okay.
They don't contain reserves, and rolling blackouts is imminent.
Okay, so the red phone was ringing.
Yes, and the reason why we talk about stage 3 is because at that particular time, we were, unbeknownst to us, we were moving energy through the CAISO. During the energy transactions on the day before, we transacted where we purchased 50 megawatts of energy at need. And unbeknownst to us, the person that we got paired up with was exporting energy from the CAISO to Meade and to supply us with the energy. And during a stage 3 emergency, The CAISO prevents you from being able to take energy out of the CAISO. They're trying to save their grid, and they prevented that from happening, and we lost a lot of megawatts from it.
Okay, how long was the Magnolia power plant down? It says here it tripped and it did not return until Sunday at 1 o'clock. So does that mean it tripped on Saturday?
Magnolia tripped on,
I mean, I'm just wondering, it sounded, the way that this is written, it says when it came back on, but it doesn't say when it went down, and I'm just wondering, was it a period of days or was it hours?
no, it was less than a day.
Okay.
But let's see, it was very important to see it tripped on Saturday, hour ending 13. So, I'm sorry, 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay, so it was down for approximately 24 hours.
That's correct.
Okay, so the conversion of these events, because we're talking about the Labor Day weekend, the convergence of these events took place basically over that Saturday and Sunday, and we were without that power plant. When you use the word tripped, does that mean, is that just another way of saying it just stopped producing power, or it had a technical fault?
So tripping means that it definitely stopped producing electricity, not because we wanted to stop producing electricity.
So some kind of technical
fault. Sorry?
So some kind of technical fault occurred where a resource that you depend on is suddenly unavailable.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's why you have reserves, because these things do happen.
Okay, well, I mean, I would concur with my fellow commissioners that the performance of GWP during this really intense event was very, very good, and I'm glad to have all of these details. I feel like I need even more time to kind of, read through it again to really understand what happened. But it's very impressive, and I'm grateful for the detail that you went into. Any other comments or questions from the commissioners on this agenda item? Okay, thank you both for the presentation, and we'll move to the next item.
Great. Next item before you is 3B, Water Resources Update.
President Pro Tem Long, members of the commission, I'd like to introduce Mr. Mike DeGhetto, who will present this report for the Water Department.
President Pro Tem Wall, members of the commission, my name is Michael DeGhetto, Chief Assistant General Manager for Water. And I'm going to go ahead and give you a water resources update. And I always like to start, with giving context for Glendale's water system. So we serve 200,000 residents, and, we're the fourth largest city in LA County. And out of that, we have about 34,000 water services, and 22,000 of those are single-family units. And the remainder are commercial and multi-family units. And one thing that I think, is important when you talk about our water system is there's 48,000 multi-family dwelling units. So really there's 22,000 and 48,000 dwelling units. And it's something that I think is surprising to a lot of folks, that we have that many dwelling units within our service area. So it's hard to make comparisons sometimes between our system and other water systems if you just look at the number of service connections. We're one of the founding members of Metropolitan Water District in 1928. We pump water from the San Fernando Basin and the Verdugo Basin. and it makes up between 30 and 40% of our water supplies, local supplies. We're co-owner of the LA Glendale Water Reclamation Plant, and our first recycled water use was in 1978. And currently, over 7% of our demand is local recycled water, and that goes through 82 recycled water meters, and it's for irrigation, dual plumbing, and industrial uses. So when you break down the supplies, and one thing to look at on this slide is really that gray line. It's customers that drive the demand. So the amount that we can pump from the San Fernando Basin is limited to the adjudication for that basin. And it's limited to a return flow credit. And it's also limited to the size of our treatment facility there. Verdugo Basin has really been limited because of declining groundwater levels. And then, of course, our supply of recycled water meets the demand for that water. So the rest of it, to add up to 100%, comes from Metropolitan Water District. And that's kind of why I have Metropolitan on the bottom, right? So it's customer demand minus those other sources, and the remainder is to Metropolitan Water District. Now, a lot of times, I'll get asked about, why doesn't Glendale do desalinization? And, the main reason is because we're not next to the ocean. But in actuality, all of our water is desalinated water. And I call it natural desalinization. And it's basically the water cycle. The water evaporates mainly from the oceans, and it comes down as precipitation in our case, in the Sierra Nevada and the Rocky Mountains. And then that's the source of water that we use in Glendale that we purchase from Metropolitan. So to talk more about the local sources, we're part of an adjudication in the and it's called the Upper Los Angeles River area. And we have water rights in the San Fernando Basin, and it's limited to 20% of the amount of water that we deliver in Glendale. And when that adjudication came about, that's representative or on the fact that we import water. So some of that water goes back into the basin, and that's where that 20% is derived from. And all of that water that we get from the San Fernando Basin comes as part of the Glendale Operable Unit, which is an EPA superfine cleanup site for volatile organic compounds, which is like industrial solvents and chromium-6. And then the Verdugo Basin is a different kind of right. It's a prescriptive right. So we get a certain amount of water rights, around 3,500 acre-feet a year, that we can pump from that basin. But we're pumping less than that. We're pumping around 1,000 acre-feet, just because of the declining groundwater levels in that basin. We can go to the next slide. So we do have some local sustainable sources of water. And in 1968, Glendale and the City of LA partnered on a feasibility study for a regional reclamation plant. And by 1976, the plant was completed. And the first part of the recycle system is a joint LADWP Glendale system. And, we first started using that water in 1978. We ran a dedicated main even before the joint system to supply water from the cooling towers at Grayson Power Plant. And kind of between 1992 and 2014, we really expanded on that system, and the city's invested over $20.3 million in our recycled system expansion. Recently, we went through what's called the 1211 wastewater change petition with the state's Division of Water Rights to expand use, and that led to the formation of an LA River Flow Study Group because the state was concerned about agencies like Glendale using more of the recycled water and actually putting less recycled water down the LA River. And that flow study is an ongoing project. And that there's also has been the Upper Los Angeles River and Tributaries Working Group, which focused more on how to revitalize and build parks and things along the LA River and the Verdugo Wash. So when I talk about water resources and kind of resiliency, it's really important for Glendale to consider where water from the Metropolitan Water District comes from. And that's basically there's right now 2 main sources into metropolitan system. Comes from the Colorado River Basin to the Colorado River Aqueduct. And it comes from the Upper Sierra, the Lower Sierra, through the Bay Delta into the State Water Project. And when you look at the water supply outlook, from that perspective, currently, Upper Sierra is only at 66% of normal snowpack. Lower Sierra is only at 58%. Colorado River Basin's at 106%, but really deliveries on the Colorado are driven more by the volumes of water stored in Lake Powell and Lake Mead. And so what I'm showing is the snowpack percentages of normal, and then the water storage percentages in kind of the main reservoirs along the State Water Project and along the Colorado River Basin. And one of the good news things about being part of a regional water supplier like Metropolitan is in 1999, Metropolitan completed the Diamond Valley Lake project and invested about $2 billion in storage in kind of what we would call in-basin storage for water as well. So that's part of really Glendale's system, and since Glendale's part of Metropolitan. So really it's kind of, I look at it as a mass balance of water that's available versus water that goes to meet customer demands. And a really good thing that happened is in May of 2019, the states that get water from the Colorado River Basin work through and sign a drought contingency plan on the Colorado River. And what that allowed is for Metropolitan to have access to water that it stores in Lake Mead, even if there's shortages on that system, on that Colorado River system. And what that did is it tremendously increased Metropolitan's flexibility to store water in times of surplus on the State Water Project. So if there's a surplus on the State Water Project, Metropolitan can now back off pumping on the Colorado River and store water in Lake Mead. So it's essentially like having a new reservoir available to the region without actually having to have constructed it. And so for the near term, what that enabled was even, in this water year, Metropolitan got only 3,400,000 acre feet of water from the State Water Project, 1 million acre feet from the Colorado River Aqueduct, and using some of the other programs they have about working with farm irrigation districts to fallow land and things like that. They got another 160,000. There was no change in storage in Metropolitan's available storage in the last year, because customer demands were only 1.5 million acre feet, so the storage balance remained for 2 years at 3.1 million acre feet, which is basically 2 full years worth of all customer demands if there would have been no water to import. And as that happened, 2020 was the hottest, driest summer for the Colorado Basin states. So the regional investments in being part of a regional system is really already helping to adapt to climate change. So future actions and future things that are important is, again, to complete the tunnels around the Bay Delta, because it's going to improve the environment and improve the habitat in that area. And it's going to increase resiliency because it's going to help make a more consistent level of water available closer. I don't know that it's ever going to reach kind of what the original envisioning from the State Water Project was, but it's going to make that water more consistent. And then other regional projects is the Regional Recycled Water Project that Metropolitan's working on to use water from the county's water reclamation plant in Carson and provide that water and treat it to a level that it can be used for groundwater recharge in Orange County and up in the main San Gabriel Basin, which will help relieve or make more supplies available for Glendale. And then, of course, for us here in Glendale, when the direct potable reuse regulations move further along, there's some opportunity for Glendale to do some direct potable projects. And then, of course, as the power plant project moves along, there's 2 deep wells at the power plant that have very good water quality that we can put into our system. They meet water quality standards already. And that'll help us produce a little bit more from the San Fernando Basin. And the other part of this, like I mentioned, was customers and customer use. And really tracking, since we had that water supply shortage in 2015, the customer demands have remained, on an average, cumulative reduction of 18% below what they had been in 2013. So demands haven't really crept back up to previous levels.
Mike, can I just interrupt you for a moment and ask, did you say 18%?
Yes, 18%.
Thank you.
And, to look at that further, so this chart shows 2013 water production by month is the top line. 2014 is pretty close to that. The red line is 2015 when we had mandatory conservation. I think we got down to 2 days a week. So that red line is kind of an abnormal sort of line. And then the other years start to group together. And as you'll see in the next slide after this, we've really, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 have really grouped together now and are much slower, again, about 18% lower than they used to be, say, in 2013 and 2014. And when we talk about kind of where the fluctuations are in usage and where there is a place for more conservation, that orange line is single-family residential use. And so it swings greatly between winter and summer months. And that's because of outdoor irrigation. Now, multifamily residential is the green line, and it varies between winter and summer, and commercial varies, and then all those other ones, irrigation, municipal, and those things are lower, but they vary based on summer and winter as well. But the big swing is in single-family residential. So if we just look at single-family residential versus temperature, it tracks almost exactly with temperature. So when it's hotter, people turn up their irrigation. When it's cooler, they turn their irrigation down. And they really turn the irrigation down. And this is one good outcome from that water supply shortage, is I think everyone's been very good at, if it's raining, they turn off their sprinklers. And you can see in 2017 and then in 2019, we had really high precipitation, and that single-family residential use dropped way off, more than it would normally. And, you know, on this chart, I'm just highlighting again when those high precipitation events are, to really see that drop off. It's kind of where the curve deviates from just temperature. And I think I've talked about this chart before, but, you know, if I'm plotting single family residential use against the orange line, and, you know, those first years, the 14, 15, or 12, 13, 14, are kind of before we had that mandatory conservation in 2015. In 2015 is that really abnormal one in the middle that doesn't have the normal summer peak. And then I'm showing the precipitation coming down, right? So that's like a negative look on the scale, but I think it lines up and kind of shows that point about turning off sprinklers when it's raining. And again, you know, I'll say this every time, you know, there's the water, and that's an important resource, but, you know, a really important resource is the staff that work in the water division. You know, the State Water Resources Control Board Division of Drinking Water brings the complexity of drinking water systems, both on distribution and treatment. And, you know, we have the highest ranking for distribution and for treatment. We used to only be a T4 system up until about 2 years ago, when we added another treatment train at our operable unit at the Glendale Water Treatment Plant, and that bumped us up to a T5. And I'm really proud of like two of our staff members that have their T5. You know, they were able to get it after our system got bumped up, and, you know, the T5 exam and the T4 exam are like very hard exams, and the T5 is an oral exam. So there's actually a panel from Division of Drinking Water that gets put together when you go take that exam, and we've had two of our staff pass that. And then of course, and then we also have 8 PE licenses between all of our water staff. Actually, one of our field supervisors has a PE as well. So it's really, to me, the most important resource. And I think, like we talked about, you know, I'm ready for Q&A, and, you know, I know to support conservation, right, we use recycled water, and that's what our signs say, but I think the new term now is sustainability. So I'm ready to answer any questions anyone might have.
Thank you for that
I have a
presentation.
question.
Yeah, was that,
Okay, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, Commissioner Avanesian, did you have any questions?
Yeah, actually, I have a simple question. I mean, I want to understand what this rainwater, how much we are able to capture and treat and return to river, and how much it runs away from Glendale to adjacent cities.
So, President Pro Tem Law, Commissioner Avanesian, the primary location where water gets captured and stored or percolated for the San Fernando Basin is in Pacoima and in the Hanson spreading grounds and up into Hunga spreading grounds. And it really depends on the precipitation. So the county will store water within those detention basins to help it go into the basin. And I think we've had pretty low precipitation the last couple of years, and it's been around 22,000 acre feet or so has been captured and stored. But a normal year might be closer to 70,000 acre feet. but local precipitation's been a lot lower. So but it has been actively managed by the county.
Commissioner, does that answer your question? Can I move on to Commissioner Flanagan? Did you have any questions for Mr. DeGhetto?
I do, thank you, and I'll just pick up on what Commissioner Avanesian mentioned, which is, this whole notion of stormwater capture, rainwater capture. I served on the board of Tree People for 6 years. I'm no longer on the board, but Tree People has done a lot of work in the LA area. First planting trees to capture smog, and then done a lot of work with stormwater management. And even if we can just collect locally to provide for our irrigation, I think it would be a great step forward. But I did have a couple other comments. I thought it was a great presentation. Thank you for the detail. I don't really understand that return flow credit up in the San Fernando. Can you just run, Mike, can you just run by that one more time? Are we actually piping water back there so it can percolate back in?
President Pro Tem Law, Commissioner Flanagan, no, that's related. I didn't really go into a lot of detail on this, but the city of Los Angeles sued everyone that was pumping from the San Fernando Basin in the LA River area and tributaries in a lawsuit that went from around 1959 to 1979. And basically it went up to the state Supreme Court, and they ruled that in the San Fernando Basin, the only entity that has any water rights in that basin is the city of Los Angeles. So part of what I would call a settlement, or the final judgment, at least to get everyone to end the 20 years of lawsuits, was that Glendale and Burbank, 20% of the water that they serve in their service area, they can pump back out of groundwater basin. So it's really not a physical thing. It's more of it's physical to the extent that the argument made, hey, we're importing water. Some of that water must make it back into the basin, so we should be allowed to pump that. And that 20% is what the adjudication says.
I see. Thank you. And then am I hearing this right, or reading this right, or taking notes correctly, that the biggest source of water for Glendale is the Colorado River?
It's Metropolitan Water District, so it depends on whatever the balance that year between State Water Project and the Colorado River. Okay. And then just the complexity. I like what you said, Mike, about staff and the quality of our staff and the training of our staff. Is that a good thing to have a high complexity rating? Is that just inherent because we're serving a city of 200,000 people, or do we have a really advanced system that's better than others? It's not necessarily based on the quality. It is more based on the complexity. It's based on partly the number of residents, so 200,000 kind of bumps us up on the level. And the treatment level was bumped up because our treatment facility has multiple treatment trains, again, for the volatile organic compounds. And when we added we have an ion exchange unit that removes the chromium, that bumped us up from a T4 to a T5. But we also have a UV system there for disinfection from the wells. If we redevelop a well and we first turn it back on, we can use the UV to do disinfection until the bacteriological samples clear up. So that way we're not wasting the water or dumping it down. But it was really adding the chromium treatment facility that bumped us up to a T5.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Jasmadarian?
Thank you. I've got some questions on the recycled water. How much water is available still to use, whether by expanding the system for non-potable use or through direct potable reuse? right now, and assuming that whatever happens with the LA River tributaries, that judgment is made.
President Pro Tem Lowell, Commissioner Jasmine so Glendale has a long-standing agreement with the city of Pasadena, because at the time our recycled water system was first expanded, city of Pasadena helped contribute to the cost of that to make the system bigger to help serve water to Pasadena. So right now, based on that wastewater change petition that we went through, there's 3,100 acre feet that is allocated for Pasadena. There's another 400 acre feet that we put in that change petition for expanding our recycled water system within Glendale. In addition to that, there is another 2,000 to 4,000 acre feet that would be available from the treatment plant, depending on how the treatment plant's operated. Right now, the treatment plant is only treating 16 million gallons a day, but it's rated for 20 million gallons a day. And a lot of that work is going to depend on upgrades at the treatment plant, and then wastewater flows into the system. So when I talk about maybe doing a direct potable project, when those regulations kind of work their way through on all the treatment that would be needed for that, there's a project that we could do that I think would work for about 2,000 acre feet or so. So I know that's a long, complicated answer, but it is kind of a complicated, I suppose, issue. And then related to the LA River flow and those kind of things are, I would say, unfortunately, the order that we got from the state for that 3,500 acre feet I mentioned, the 3,100 and the 400, it has like a reopener in it that would allow the state to come back and reduce that. But I would say that they would have to take into consideration any project the city of LA is doing as well before they made any reductions to Glendale. And of course, the city has very large projects that they're considering, and I would say that the reopener would have to go into that, because the vast majority of the water that's in the river during dry periods actually comes from the Donald C. Tillman treatment plant up in Van Nuys. So it wouldn't make sense to reduce from Langmore when that's the primary source of the water that's going down the river.
Okay.
And I would just say that every committee that I go to, and anytime there's public comment, my public comment is Glendale has plans to reuse 100% of its recycled water from that plant, whatever that amount is.
Great. So moving on to staffing, it's great that you've got so many D5s, I noticed on your chart, and you've got a couple of T5s as well. And even though those are pretty rare in the state, I mean, I think there's only a few hundred in the state altogether. Are you having problems with other agencies coming and trying to tap your staff? And then if you are, what's your succession plan for that, training plan? How is that working out?
The biggest issue that we have with staffing and people leaving, it's going to the city of Los Angeles. LADWP pays more than all the surrounding agencies, more than Burbank, more than Pasadena, more than Glendale. And all the staff that I've left, I would say all but one, and I'm including engineers in this, have gone to LADWP. The way that we've been trying to address that is being really proactive on monitoring when staff are close to like a promotion, maybe going from an operator to a senior operator, and being flexible in having, not really having a limit on the number of senior operators we can have, and then trying to promote staff to move them up to those levels. The other thing that we work with is the union, as far as when we do our union negotiations, to include salary surveys and things like that, to try and keep our salary levels within, percentages, whatever that is, of kind of surrounding agencies. And then I think, the other thing that's been good for the staffing retention, I think it just depends on the individual. I mean, I know maybe at LA, the pay might be higher, but you may be in really just one aspect of the work, say just on a leak crew or a valve crew for a very long time. Whereas, we work hard to make sure that we rotate staff through the different crews because we're maybe a medium size compared to LA. So you can get a lot more exposure to all aspects of working at the water system.
Okay, great, thank you.
Commissioners, do we have any further questions for Mr. DeGhetto? Okay, thank you very much for that detailed report. Again, I really do appreciate how granular you get with that report, so thank you for that, and we'll move to the next item.
Sure. And the final item before you, Commissioners, we have 3C, a strategic plan update.
President Pro Tem, members of the commission, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Craig Keenan, who will make this presentation.
Yes, President Pro Tem, Lowell, and commissioners, my name is Craig Keenan. I'm the Deputy General Manager for Business Services. It's time for I think the last time we did this update was about 6 months ago, maybe 9 months ago. So I'll go over the format of our strategic plan first and then give you our current status. So basically, the way we have this plan divided up, we have our vision, which basically states what we want to achieve overall from a high-level perspective. We have our mission statement. It's basically says how we plan to reach our vision. Our core values, basically we follow the core values that the city has put out, and I'll go over those. And then there's 6 strategic areas of focus. These are problems, concerns, or challenges of strategic importance that we consider important to address. So in terms of our vision, we want to be recognized as a trusted community partner with a reputation for excellence, reliability, exceptional customer service, innovation, affordability, and sustainability. Our mission, building upon more than 100 years of history, Glendale Water and Power shall provide safe and reliable water and electric services for the citizens of Glendale in a cost-efficient, transparent, affordable, and sustainable manner. Our core values are excellence, integrity, honesty, trust, fairness, teamwork, respect, accountability, compassion, and cultural awareness. So in terms of our results, we have 6 areas of strategic focus. There's about 26 strategies and about 90 goals. So I'm going to give you a summary of each of our progress in each of the 6 areas of strategic focus. So under affordability and fiscal responsibilities, we have 4 strategies and 8 goals. We have 1 goal is complete and 7 goals are on track or they're continuing, meaning we meet them annually. So we're 100% in line with what we projected for that. Under exceptional customer service, we have 9 strategies and 34 goals. 19 of those goals have been completed. 7 goals are on track, and there's 7 goals are on hold or behind schedule. Of those that are behind or on hold or behind schedule, 2 of them are because we had a vendor bankruptcy, and City ISD is currently looking for another vendor to provide what we need for 2 of these goals. 3 of the goals are behind because we've had some changes to our software system, and we're looking at one was due in March 2020. Now they're looking like June 2021 for a couple of those. One of them was to test, validate, and refine our CSI parameters for billing exceptions. It was supposed to be done by March. It's partially done, and it should be completed December 2020. And then we had a couple of them that were COVID-19 related or other. One of them was to ensure appropriate staff levels and policies and training are in place to ensure 95% of new water installations are completed within 8 weeks by December 2019. That's on hold because we've gone to small crews and COVID protocols to maintain social distancing. So until those things are, COVID is there's new policies on that. That one will be on hold. Another one, we were going to be developing targeted customer engagement campaigns for our various programs. We're in the process the past 6-8 months of reevaluating programs, especially in light of the new clean energy programs that are planned. So those will be on hold until we figure out what's happening with those programs. But we're looking at early next year, January, February, we'll have that. Go to the next slide. Under the workforce slide, we're pretty much on track there. We have 1 goal behind schedule, and that has to do with updating our annual enterprise-wide safety program. We currently do not have a safety officer position, so that's on hold until the decision is made on filling that one. Reliability, there's 3 strategies, 17 goals. 1 goal is ahead of schedule, 2 are on track or continuing, and that should say 7 goals are behind schedule. In terms of the ones that are behind, one of them was to complete the Unit 9 generator overhaul by April 2020. We had some issues getting the owner's engineer to come out during the COVID, and so that slowed that down. We're looking at a new completion date of December. Another one was complete Unit 9 upgrades, controls upgrades by April 2020. We had some delays because of the other unit repairs that prevented the commencement of this. We're looking at November 2021 on that. We had a goal to implement pole and bulb inspection replacements by December 2020. There's some scope changes on that, and the new RFP has been advertised in September, so that was delayed. Substation breaker replacements, we were supposed to do 2 a year, where we reevaluated the technology we're wanting to use, and so that one is going to have to go through a finance to get a new vendor for that. We had a really lofty goal to replace 300 transmission distribution poles each year. We don't have enough staff to do that, so we're going to have to reevaluate whether that's feasible. Similarly, water had a goal to complete 100% annual valve replacement projects each year. Due to COVID and small staffs, they're concentrating on other emergency work. They're using micro crews and social distancing, and so that's not going to happen. Sustainability. We had 5 strategies, 14 goals. 4 goals are ahead of schedule, 8 goals are on track, and 2 goals are on hold or behind. Basically, that's due to software modifications. We're looking at these were going to be done in June of 2020. There was 2 of them. We're looking at January 2021. They have to do with net metering for time of use customers and modifying our billing system to accept that data, produce the bills. In the last area is automation and innovation. We had 2 strategies, 11 goals. 2 goals have been completed, 6 goals are on track, and 2 are behind. The 2 that are behind, one of them is integrated, our SCADA integrated communications optical network by June 2020. That project is in budget. It's been budgeted. Implementation was delayed because we had to finish the upgrade of our main SCADA system before we could start this project. We're looking at a completion date of December 2021. And the other one was to fully integrate our OMS PMS with other systems by June 2020. This project is pretty complicated. It's an ongoing project with multiple implementations. The project kicked off has started and servers have been configured, but it looks like more like March 2021 will be the completion date. Now, there's an addendum at the back of this presentation that lists all the details of the various scorecard, essentially. And that's for you to have and use. I wasn't planning on going through every one of those. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Commissioners, Commissioner Avanesian, do you have any questions?
I have a simple question. What is the best achievement that we had in this year, and what is that we less achieved, and it needs to be improved?
Well, the 2 areas of focus that we did, I think, a really good job were the affordability and fiscal responsibility and exceptional customer service. We met 100% of our financial responsibility goals. About 80% of the customer service, but we couldn't do anything about the vendor bankruptcy, and software changes, they happen. They're just delayed implementation of a few items, but we're pretty much got a handle on that. The area where we're hit most is the reliability, because we have to have crews out and we're in COVID, and so there's the workforce issues when they're out in the field. Does that answer your question? Or?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Flanagan, do you have any questions or comments?
I do. Thank you, Craig, for your presentation and your works. There's a general question, but as I look through those indicators and I heard you talk, I'm just wondering, when we talked in there, it talks about street lights, you're doing 800 a year. I don't know what percentage that is. I don't know how many are going to get done, but there was that, and then there was the shifting customers to residential TOU. We're going for 2% per year. I don't know where we're at, but I don't. It seemed like a small increment. And then I read about EV chargers, and it was like 4 chargers per year. I think you just mentioned transformers, and you mentioned staffing constraints. And so I'm just wondering, are the goals in the strategic plan, in your view, Craig, are they rigorous enough to sort of transform this utility and get us really in line for the future?
You're asking for my these goals were put together 2 or 3 years ago, and a lot has happened since then. Yeah. So it's probably time for us to look at them and update them. I know we've done more EV chargers. I think we got 6 of them down in the Civic Center now, and the goal was 4. And I know we got a fast charger over at the City Hall, and I think there's 2 or 3 more chargers for there. We have chargers going in various parking lots around the city.
Yeah.
So 4 a year is low, but like I said, back when we started these, it was kind of hard to get an EV charger approved in the city. And now the rest of, we're all on board now as far as handicap rules and those kinds of things. So they're starting to move a lot quicker. And yes, those goals could be higher. Now, as far as the TOU rate, that's a difficult one. I mean, customers, yeah, that's a big education project for educating customers on the benefits of TOU. And it was in the 2018 code, so we did change the time bands for the peak for time of use, and made it smaller and changed the rates and tried to make it more beneficial for people. And we do have some programs to push TOU rates, but in the past 9 months, it's all been about COVID. So hopefully we can get back on track.
That's great. I appreciate what you're saying. It sounds like the plan needs to be updated. And I just want to make the point that given the urgency, and again, we had a great meeting last time talking about the wildfires and the need to move quickly, or more quickly, not more slowly. It just seems as though we don't want to give a big green block saying job well done if the target is not as aggressive as we believe it needs to be at this point. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Jasmadarian, do you have any questions or comments?
No.
Okay.
No questions or comments.
We do have a caller on the line. Is that caller calling in regards to this agenda item, or is it a general comment?
General comment on the
Okay.
application.
Great, thank you. I'd just like to make the comment, this is a very good and again, detailed presentation. I think also that it might be time for an update. And a couple of the things that jumped out at me were the core values. I have no problem with excellence, integrity, honesty, trust, and fairness. I think those are all good things, as well as teamwork and the rest. But I think that as part of the core values of GWP, being a municipal utility, being a utility for the people who live here in the city, you know, it's not an investor-owned utility. It's a utility that is run for the benefit of people who live in this community. One of the core values that this utility is embracing right now is the value of creating a much more sustainable electrical service and water service. And as part of that, I think that could be reflected in our core values. You know, we've gone through this long process with Grayson and gone from sort of an old utility model to an innovative utility model. And that could be reflected in these core values, that this is a utility that's really looking forward and not looking back. So when it comes time to revisit those core values, I think that could be incorporated there. And as part of that, I think part of being forward-looking is really embracing innovation, and I do see a lot of evidence of that in this report, and I think that's just something that the utility should continue to talk about and reflect in their work. That's all. So with that said, should we move to the next item?
Sure.
Any further comments? Hearing none, we'll move to the next item.
Thank you. Next item before you is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or discussion. The general manager may refer the matter to the appropriate staff for investigation and report. We have one caller for this commission, Jerry Johnson.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, thank you for your patience. If you'd like to make your public comment now, you are welcome to do so.
Okay, all right, I appreciate it. Good evening, my name is Jerry Johnson, and I'm speaking on behalf of Jewel City Bowl, a bowling center that has been in Glendale for over 50 years. And hopefully some of you are familiar with our establishment, and if not, I'd like to see you guys come visit us after the lockdown. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to address the commission. You probably don't hear much from the public when things are going well, so I appreciate your willingness to listen to your customer base. And I'm sure the commission has been working diligently to address a variety of unintended consequences stemming from the COVID pandemic. The issue I'm hoping to address today is the business electricity rate structure and how we can mitigate the imbalances that are being caused in the current model. As I'm sure you are aware, our electricity is billed in a number of ways. Part of the billing relates to actual use, but the bulk of the billing rates for commercial businesses are a demand charge, which is determined by our usage within a broad 12-month period. Most businesses were forced to close back in March, and while some have reopened, many, such as ours, are still shuttered by county and state decree. We've now been closed for 6 months, and we don't have any reliable information from either the state or the county as to when the restrictions will be lifted. In the meantime, we continue to pay our utilities even though we have no business to recoup those costs. If the electricity billing was based on a usage basis, we would ultimately face a very small bill, which we could service from our cash reserves. As it stands, we're required to pay thousands of dollars in electricity charges every month that we have not used. In fact, our electricity usage last month was only 85 kilowatt hours, even though we are paying for almost 7,000 kilowatt hours. Now, I understand the rate structure that brought us to this point, and I can appreciate the logic that drives such a structure under a typical annual cycle. But in these times of unprecedented restrictions on our liberties and ability to do business, I find it necessary to ask for assistance from our larger vendors. And I would ask that this commission to consider a temporary abatement of the demand charge calculation or consider billing us for actual energy consumed rather than a minimum baseline that hasn't been relevant for over 6 months and likely won't be relevant for several months to come. At a minimum, perhaps the look-back period could be reduced to 1 or 2 months. Ideally, we'd be able to apply our overpayments during the lockdown to future usage. Absent an immediate modification to the demand charge structure, we would really be forced to disconnect our electric service, and doing so would remove power from several critical safety systems and leave our facility in a precarious position. It would seem that forcing us to discontinue service would be unfair and unreasonable, and I'm certain we aren't the only business in this situation. We are more than willing to pay our share in energy consumption from the GWP grid, and we've already paid for nearly $15,000 in electricity that we have not used. We simply can't afford to continue paying for large amounts of electricity that we aren't using. So thank you for your time and consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions, if any.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I understand there are limitations on the amount of discussion that we can undertake during public comment, but do any of the commissioners have questions for the commenter? Okay, hearing none, I thank you, sir, for your time and for commenting today, and we will move on to the next item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next item before you is agenda forecast. At 5A is agenda forecast.
Commissioners, for the next meeting, which is on November the 2nd, we have one agenda item, which is the legislative update. And then for the December meeting, we have commission elections. I'd like to suggest an agenda item. I don't know if it's really a full presentation or more of a discussion, but with the governor's recent announcement about the electrification of our vehicle fleet, in California over the next 10 to 15 years. I'm really curious to know what GWP, how GWP is planning for that, basically, because it is going to require infrastructure. It's going to require, it's going to put new demands on our electric system. And I think in the world of power generation and transmission, a decade is a pretty short period of time. So I'd like to propose that we have that added to the agenda to see if, not necessarily during the next 2 months, but at some time in the future, if a member of GWP staff could address the issue of what discussions, if any, are being undertaken at GWP about vehicle electrification.
Could I add to the agenda forecast, please? I think that's a great suggestion to have a discussion of EVs, their impact on the grid, and how we're preparing for this phase out. I guess it's 2035, no more gasoline, internal combustion engine cars. Another thing that, I mean, the speaker's comment this afternoon is really valid in my view. I don't know what the answer is. I understand why we have demand charges, but in this time of COVID, this is hitting businesses like the speaker presented very, very hard. I wonder if we might have some sort of a discussion of options. I know that the biggest reason not to have a change is that we need to recover. We certainly need a certain amount of revenue recovery here, and so we're counting on that. But could we have some sort of a discussion of options of demand charge relief for commercial customers that are getting really, really hit hard here?
President Pro Tem Wall, Commissioners Flanagan, and Commissioners, that's something that I know that GWP is taking a look at. They're sensitive to the fact that this has been really tough for, well, all customers, but in particular the commercial sector with this demand charge. So I know that they have in the works looking at a form of relief that could be rolled out. So I'm not sure timing-wise when would be appropriate. We might need to get back to you after we've consulted with the general manager, but I think that as long as, more than one commissioner, and I assume two at least, are interested in this topic, that could be brought back to this commission for discussion.
Thank you.
Yes, and I would second that interest in hearing a response about the demand charge relief. Yes.
Actually, this is Ron Avanesian. I have talked about this at least 2 times. And last meeting, again, I talked about that. I mean, simply, this demand charge is based on maximum that you're using, and it is not fair. Maybe sometimes accidentally a unit is kind of using lots of power. I mean, it's not fair to calculate based on that. So for sure, I want to have this discussion.
Okay, that's great. So it sounds like there's at least 3. I mean, we don't want to get into the substance. I'll just quickly note that there's a lot of complexity to making sure you're not shifting the charge from one customer segment to another, because you can't do that. So it's unfortunately there's not a simple fix, but it's something that GWP is looking at very carefully. So with the level of interest in the community and this commission, we'll definitely bring that back for discussion.
Thank you.
Does anyone want to second my request for discussion of vehicle electrification?
I'll second it.
Okay. So do we need to make any recommendations or requests about when we would like to have these items agendized, or are we gonna wait for GWP staff to let us know when they would be able to have something ready?
Commissioner Pro Tem Lowell, I would recommend that we, particularly on the, well, actually rather on both items, it'd be best to wait,
Okay,
so we can consult with staff.
right, okay. All right, so are there any other requests or comments regarding future agenda items from any of the commissioners? Going once, going twice? Okay, should we have the next item?
Next item, we have adjournment.
All right, may I have a motion to adjourn?
I second, yeah.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.